Ty, it's so great to chat today. I joined the BYU football team as a walk-on in 2004. So kind of all the faces were new to me. And one day, early on, I was running a little behind. I needed some new gloves, ran to the equipment room, and there were some people in there that I didn't recognize, but that was kind of always the case because everybody was new. And so I got the attention of some guy, and I said, "Hey, can I get some new gloves?" And I remember he kind of looked at me for a minute, but then he went and got some gloves for me. And a few minutes later, Coach Lance Reynolds called the team up in the locker room. He says, I want to introduce the toughest, hardest nosed, best player that's ever played for BYU. And out you walk, the same guy who moments ago had helped me get gloves. So I don't know if you remember that, but that was unforgettable for me.
Yeah, it wasn't the first time I got mistaken for a equipment manager. I was in Cleveland, and in the NFL they have cuts towards the end, and so they're picking up a few new practice squad guys. And I used to hang out in the back with the equipment guys, just kind of place to hang, and those guys were always good guys, put a lot of time in, and um, I remember I was back there and they had kind of stepped away, and this lineman comes up to the window and he's like, "Hey, I need a pair of size 15 like Sharks and shoes." And so I'm like, "Okay." So I go in the back and pick out a pair of shoes and I bring them out, and he's like, "All right, appreciate it." And then later that day we're in the huddle and he's looking at me, probably similar look you had on your face, like, oh man, he gives me a fist bump, like, dude, I'm sorry, thanks for the shoes though. And so I kind of look like an equipment guy, probably physically, uh, more than a football player.
So good. One of the first players I interviewed on this podcast was Kellen Moore. And I kind of joke, if there was ever a larger gap between how good somebody looks and how good they are, I think you and Kellen both might be right in that category. And of course, I was a 5'8" guy. I didn't look good, but I never reached anywhere close to the levels you two did. So that gap, you two have one of the largest gaps there.
Yeah, I guess that's a compliment, so I appreciate it. But
I think it is. Uh, so Ty, you've had an incredible career, and as you think back on all the things you've learned from football and your career, what lessons would you most want to pass on to others?
so I think a lot of us that played football, I'm sure you're this way. There's so many life lessons in playing football, whether it's getting knocked down and having to get back up, whether it's owning mistakes you've made and having to face your teammates, the next day in the locker room or the meeting room. There's just so many things that go into football specifically. I think more so than other sports where it's a physical game. It's hard. It's hot, in the summer months when you're training and getting ready for the season. But for me, probably the biggest one is because I wasn't a super big physical guy. It was just a little bit of toughness, a little bit of grit, and in that kind of getting knocked down and getting right back up and do it again the next play. It's probably for me. I had probably one of the worst games as a quarterback. I think I tied a record for 7 interceptions in one game in the NFL, and I just remember walking in the locker room for one right after the game, and then it was it felt worse even on Monday. Like, oh man, I got to go do this again and face my teammates and coaches. And but as a player, you just you own it. I had a bad game, guys. I'm going to work harder. It's not going to happen again. And so that's helped me along the way with a lot of just life challenges, because not everything always goes smooth, and sometimes you do mess up, and you got to own it. And it's not what happened, and it's how you react to what happened a lot of times for me in life, and so many things that only so many things I can control. And so that one experience right there, just it just a typical football moment where I feel like you let your teammates down and just make a vow to be better the next time.
So I don't remember the 7 interceptions in an NFL game. I do remember, of course, the Heisman Trophy and win over Miami. So I imagine back then, uh, you guys probably didn't have as many sports psychologists hanging around as teams do now. So How do you deal with that? How do you deal with 7 picks in one game? I mean, yeah, that's a horrible game, but you've also got this great history of, like I'm a Heisman Trophy winner. I'm an NFL quarterback. So how did you cope with that?
Yeah, I think you have to look at what you can do better from that. My first experience playing college football was was at Wyoming, and I got in right before half. We went right down and scored a touchdown the first drive of the second half, and thought, okay, this is no different than high school, and then proceeded to throw 4 interceptions and fumble, and lost to Wyoming on a night game. Back then it was only one ESPN and one game on that week, and it was that night. And so that night, I've said, hey, I got to work harder. I got to be better. This isn't just like high school. I got to put more time and energy into it. So it made me a better player. Because of that, I think, because I did work harder and paid more attention to the details. And so having those experiences, it helped me deal with that one game in Cleveland, where through 7 picks, and okay, I got to work harder. I've done this before. I know what I got to do. And so having those, maybe smaller experiences all along the way, whether it's failing to get a conversion on third and short or third and long and missing a pass, to having multiple bad plays in a game. So I think you learn a little bit along the way through those experiences, and I know it was that way for me. And the success, I feel like, yeah, it helps give you that confidence. Like, hey, I've done this before. I know I'm better than that because I have had success in the past too. So you take a little bit of everything, and you just kind of move forward with it, and have a little self confidence, maybe a little self talk instead of a counselor or a therapist doing it for you.
So this reminds me, it's a little bit of a tangent, but it reminds me of something I learned in school. And I don't remember exactly when I internalized it, but a professor asks a question and somebody raises their hand and they get the question right. I think it was actually in law school. And professor asks another question and somebody else raises their hand and they get the question right. And you're like, wow, these people are really smart. Ask another question. Somebody else raised their hand. And all of a sudden it feels like everybody knows everything, but it takes a little thinking to realize, no, just like the one person who knew that answer was able to answer it really well. And so we don't see all of the times all of the students didn't know the answer. And so it can make us feel like we're not as smart. Now, of course, some of my classmates, they did know all of the answers, but many of us didn't. And when you tell these stories, the 7 interceptions or the 4 interceptions against Wyoming, I don't remember those. Nobody remembers those. We remember your great
I
success.
remember those. They remind me of those every now and then. So
Yeah, so it's just I appreciate you sharing those stories and reminding all of us that with great success, you don't reach great levels of success without some big missteps along the way. Maybe last question, and this is a little bit of a tangent also, but I'm just curious. You come, you had a good high school career. You come to BYU. I'm sure your expectations were high. But at what point did you realize I'm actually like, yeah, I'm not only just a pretty good quarterback here at BYU, but suddenly I'm in the national conversation for the best player in college football. At what point did you realize that, and what was that like having that realization?
so my sophomore year, we played Penn State in the Holiday Bowl, and Penn State was known for their defense and physicality and those kind of things. And so, our sports media department put out some Christmas ties with the stats from sophomore year, kind of to generate some publicity for going into the next year. And it wasn't to try to win the Heisman that year because that was long gone. But we went in, and I think I threw for 570 something yards against Penn State. And at that point, it was like, man, nobody's done that to Joe Paterno ever, probably. And so that gave a lot of confidence going into my junior year. And then we had Miami on the schedule. At our second game, we played UTEP first, and then Miami. And after beating them, it was like, okay, this is could be a special year for the whole team. You know, they were ranked number one. We ended up winning that game, which kind of was the springboard for winning the Heisman that season because it gave us credibility and it wasn't just doing it against whack competition,
Yeah.
which was the knock I think for some of the other quarterbacks that came before me that finished second or third. So that opportunity to play a number one ranked team and then to win that game really kind of puts you in the forefront. It was like, wow, this could actually maybe happen. And I think as a player, though, you don't ever let yourself think too far ahead. It was kind of the old cliche, take one game at a time. But knowing we had just won that game really kind of set the tone for the rest of the season for our team in general. So
Yeah, pretty cool. It's like we all have big dreams, but it's like you don't know until you do it, and then suddenly you do it, and it's like, yeah, I can do this. Well, Ty, it's so fun for me to connect with you again, and you're just a childhood hero of mine, and I just appreciate you taking the time to share these hard-earned lessons with me and the listener. So thanks so much for coming on today.
yeah, thanks for having me, Nate. Appreciate it.